What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Big Head Chats podcast. Matty Nevett is back in to talk all things preliminary finals and a big grand final coming up this weekend. Matty, welcome back, mate. Good to have you.
Hi, Nash, man. Good to be here.
Now, we're on the Zoom today, mate. We've kept you at home. We said don't get in the car. We said just stay there in the bedroom and get on the Zoom call. So, and you said to me, I better look pretty. I better make myself a bit more presentable. I said, mate, COVID, don't need to look pretty. I'm in a beanie. The old Nike sweater. That's what we're rolling with.
Yeah, well, I haven't done a very good job, have I? I haven't had a shave, and I've got the New York hat on. I'm hardly dressed up, Nashy, but at least we're 1.5 metres away. So
no, that's it, mate.
That's COVID safe this week.
Now, Matty, coming off a big night last night, the Brownlow Medal, obviously biggest night, individual accolade in footy, and Lachie Neale, as we expected, runaway winner. What did you make of the count? Because it was one of those counts where everything you sort of thought was going to happen in terms of top five and winner seemed to happen, which is unusual.
Yeah, it was funny, wasn't it? I mean, the top four players in the market leading in terms of favouritism were the top four that, in the way that finished. Neale was a runaway winner, and then Jack Steele, Travis Boak and Petrarca all finished basically on the same amount of votes, which is what they were placed in the market. So everything went to script in that sense. But the count itself, I actually thought Channel 7 did a really good job of it, to be honest. I thought, even though it wasn't normal, it didn't feel normal, by halfway through the count, you sort of forgot about it. And it actually, probably for the first time in a long time, wasn't as dragged out as a TV event as what it normally is. It was all done and dusted by 9:30, which makes it an easy watch. I thought the interviews done throughout the night were pretty good, and obviously a really deserving winner as well in Lachie Neale, who polled out of his skin, really, didn't he? It was the highest average vote per round score that's ever happened in a count. If it was actually extrapolated across the whole season, he would have polled more votes than anyone in the history of the game. So, yeah, an extraordinary season, and he's a well-deserving winner.
Yeah, it was a crazy count for him personally. I mean, 31 votes from 17 games, and that's almost a winning score in a normal season, just about. So, yeah, impressive by Neale. And I agree with the coverage was really enjoyable, I thought. Thought Haim and Jackie did a really good job. Interviews were good, and, the front bar coming in for a few little snippets here and there, they were always funny. And over by 9:30, so all packed up in bed, ready for Monday morning. So I really like that, and hopefully it's hard when you do it in a big setting like they usually do to get it all done that quick. But, if we can sort of get it done by about 10 o'clock, I think that's usually not too bad, and people would be happy.
Yeah, especially on a Sunday night. I mean, it's usually on a Monday, so it's the same sort of thing. If they made one mistake throughout the night, I think looking back in hindsight, it was the fact that Lachie Neale had to present the medal to himself. I think it was the only flaw really in the night. It just didn't make sense that you had Chris Fagan sitting behind him. I'm sure Simon Black was nearby. They could have just done that a little bit better. Even just getting one of his teammates to hanging around his neck.
Give Dan Zorko to give him the medal or something like that. Yeah, there's plenty of
it seemed to be silly. And they thought through a lot of things really well, Channel 7 and the AFL, but probably just that one just skipped over them a touch. And if they had their time again, they would change that. But all in all, it was a really good night. Yeah, the only other funny thing was I did feel sorry for the players in Melbourne who were sitting there with their masks on and unable to obviously drink as well. So that couldn't have been overly enjoyable for the likes of Max Gawn and others that were in Melbourne, I wouldn't have thought.
My favourite part of the coverage was watching Jack McRae and Josh Dacos sit next to each other and seemingly not say a word to one another. And they looked very, very awkward. They looked like the two boyfriends that are there while their girlfriends are...
Yeah. There's a few of those tables around.
A little bit of that. But then, the camera, when they had the big gallery view of all the different places they were at, they kept having the camera on Dacos and McRae. First of all, why are they sitting together? Why are they forced to sit next to each other? And secondly, why do we keep showing them? Because they're the most awkward twosome you've seen all night.
Well, they were a bit limited with the shots that they had, didn't they? They probably had a camera in each room and that was it.
Yeah.
So the TV producers as such probably didn't have as many shots to pan between as they normally would. So some players were getting more airtime than they normally would as well, even when they weren't polling votes.
It was 2020 in a nutshell, I thought. Now, one other thing, my favourite part of the Brownlow is to watch which table and which team is getting on the cordials the hardest. And the Brisbane boys were having a fair dip at it, and they made it well known in the background while Lachie was getting presented. Huey McCluggage, who's a naturally shy person, the boys seemed to be attacking his suit, and Dane Zorko was very enjoying himself a lot during the night. Did you notice that?
I'd be surprised if they had a quiet 24 hours beforehand after being knocked out of the finals. So understandably enjoying themselves on Brownlow night, probably more so than most other people that were involved on the evening. But you know, I actually do have one other point, and I don't want to be too critical here because it's probably the wrong thing to pick out. But what are your thoughts on the Mark and the Goal of the Year awards that were handed out?
Yeah, so I liked both fine, but Jack Nunes' goal was the one for me that I thought should have won. If you're thinking of toughness of the shot, from 45 to 50 out on the wrong side for a right footer to win the game as well, that has to come into it. So I thought Jack Nunes for the goal. And I can understand the Sam Walsh mark, but you know, I think everyone was pretty clear that there was better. But I wasn't so much confused by the mark of the year, but the goal of the year was one that I thought. What do you think?
Well, I probably agree with you that Nunes, in my opinion, was the goal of the year just because of what came with it, and not just the kick itself. There's so much more to it than that, and I think that needed to be taken into account. I'm not actually being critical of the decision to award Sam Walsh mark of the year. I'm probably more just curious as to know. I don't think there's ever been less speckies in the game than what there has been over the past year or two, and that probably was shown last night that they had to award Walsh with that mark. And it was a terrific mark, don't get me wrong. It was full of courage and well-deserving, up against the other marks that he was up against. But I just wonder whether or not the game has lost that element of it. And, it's something that has been built into the game over a long period of time as part of the fabric of the game, the specky. But the way that it's played now, you just don't see it as often, and you don't see them as spectacular as well when they're taken. And I think that was evident in the fact that it wasn't a specky given as mark of the year last night, which, is usually a formality. I think really, from memory, the only one previously that I can remember that wasn't a specky was Nick Revolt's mark, probably 15 years ago now.
Yep. I
think it's probably more in the state of the game, isn't it? I don't know.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that Jeremy Howe missed the whole year, and he's usually giving us sort of 2 a week, at least 1 a week. But yeah, you'd almost think, wouldn't you, that it would happen more because of the congestion, and especially up forward with the amount of numbers that are in the forward line. I'd almost expect that, given some of the athleticism in the game, that it would lead to more players just giving themselves an extra 5-10 metres and then trying to launch into the pack and take that specky more so than when, the game was more one-on-one, but you would see more speckies then. So it's a weird dynamic where you would think that it would happen more now, but it's seemingly not doing so.
Yeah, I agree with that, with the athleticism of the game being at an all-time high, but it's probably, the flair in a lot of things has been coached out of players because the consequences of giving away a push in the back free kick in a dangerous position on the ground, outweigh the advantages of taking a high-flying mark. So I don't know if there's a way that the AFL can sort of manoeuvre rules to incorporate more speckies into the game, or it's just something that we're going to be seeing less and less of for years to come.
Well, it doesn't help when guys like Isaac Rankin come in, and it's exciting for the first 2 or 3 weeks, and then by sort of 5th, 6th game, the commentators are saying he needs to stop with the flair because it doesn't work once or twice. So because that's where the games get into, where it's exciting for Rankin or guys like Rankin to come in and do their flashy things to start with, because it say it works for the first 3 or 4 times, but then all of a sudden it doesn't work once or twice, and people start saying, "No, I need to do the team thing, needs to play the percentages." And he's drafted for a reason because he can do these sorts of things. And so if it comes off 6 times out of 10, I'm taking those 6 over the 4 that he's going to miss. You know what I mean? I'm taking his 6 flashy things over someone else's 9, semi-good things that are always going to work. So there's definitely that perception coming in to play the percentages and don't do the flashy things on the off chance it doesn't work, which I just don't think should happen.
Yeah, no, I agree. It was just something that I found a little bit fascinating out of the night.
Yep. Now, Matty, we'll start off with Friday night. So Richmond, Port Adelaide, the pick of the prelims. One of the more defensive prelims.
Happy man, Natty, you would have been relieved, man.
I've lost years off my life watching the game, but very, very happy to get the result as a Richmond fan. But could have gone either way. Super defensive game. Both teams had so many opportunities. Port definitely had opportunities to get the win. What did you make of it? In short,
I thought, despite the fact there was a low-scoring final, low-scoring game of football, I found it enthralling, and it's good, as really as good a final as I've probably seen for a while in terms of just the fact that the crowd was so involved, and it was just two really good sides going at it. And Port Adelaide, to their credit, they kept going all night long. They kept throwing everything at Richmond, and in the end, the more experienced side in finals footy prevailed. And I think that was telling. I mean, when Charlie Dixon kicked that goal in the fourth quarter, you had every reason to believe that Port Adelaide were probably going to go away with the game and win it. But I think that showed enormous maturity, level of experience from Richmond, and it was almost like the champion side rose to the occasion in that situation to be able to bounce back from that and find a way to win. So a cracking game of footy. The best team did win, but gee, you've got to give a lot of credit to Port Adelaide because they took it right up to the Tigers.
And I think in Richmond's case, they'll take a lot of confidence out of it because in their three. This is now this is their fourth, but in their three grand final runs, for the most part, they've had pretty comfortable finals wins. So 2017 qualifying and prelim were both pretty comfortable in the end, and grand final obviously smashed Adelaide. In 2019, the qualifying was an easy one. We're losing to Geelong at halftime in the prelim, but by the end of the game, they were overrunning them easily in the end. Despite how close the score was. And then this year, despite losing the qualifying, I mean, had it made easy work of the Saints. And then this was the game where, this was as close as they got, apart from 2018 when they lost to Collingwood, where you thought this could be it sort of thing. So I think you take a lot of confidence if you're Richmond, knowing that that was probably the most intense threat you had in terms of playing over there, the crowd, really backs against the wall type of stuff, and you've come out of it with a win, and now you get to go home to the Gabba, where you usually play good footy. Yeah.
How do you think Richmond's going compared to previous years when they've gone into a grand final? Are they humming along as beautifully as what they have been? I personally think that they're playing the best footy they have all season at the right time. I'm not certain that it's as high level as what it has been when they've won the premiership previously. But I do think that they're playing their best footy this year right now.
I would agree. It definitely doesn't seem, when it gets to sort of the offensive transition, it doesn't seem as seamless as other years. Some of those years, and even when it was just those hack forward punches or handballs or kicks, you still thought Richmond are going to get one here. It doesn't seem as easy as that at the moment. But I guess that's where you would have some confidence again, knowing all parts of our game are humming at the moment, well enough that we're into a grand final. So that other stuff's going to come eventually, and they're comfortable at the Gabba. So I think Richmond will be as confident as they have been in any of the 3 years, particularly knowing as well that they have a good record against Geelong in their last few outings as well. So that's definitely a positive for them. So here's a few stats for you, Matty. So Port Adelaide had 15 more inside 50s, but only had 12 shots from their 59, compared to Richmond's 19 shots on goal from 44 inside 50. So Port, had their chances. They had every right to win this game.
Yep, no, and they did. They had their opportunities, no doubt about that. There was periods throughout the game, and as every good final does, where it ebbs and flows in momentum. There was periods where Port Adelaide were right on top, and it was Richmond really having to dig deep and defend as much as they possibly could on repeat entries inside 50, and they did that so well. And it's what they've done well for a long period of time now, is just hang in there, grind away, and then find a way to score at the other end. So It was a typical Richmond performance in a lot of ways. I know they're struggling to hit the scoreboard in that sense, but their defensive efforts are as good as any, and they make it so difficult to score. And that's kind of what they do. So when the opposition side's on top, when Port Adelaide's got all that momentum, by defending so vigorously and so ruthlessly, they actually suck the life out of their opposition and deflate them as a result, because there's only so many times you can pump the footy inside 50 and not get rewarded for it before you start to drop your head. And that's what Richmond were able to do. They man the fort better than any other side. It's
like a heavyweight title fight, isn't it? So it's how many times can you get hit and wear it, and then once you tire out the opposition, can you then throw that counter punch? And I think that was what this game was. It was each team sort of given a few here and there, couldn't sort of land that final blow, and then Port had all the run in that last quarter to really take it, and Richmond wore everything, and then was able just to give that last little counter punch, and that was enough. Now for Port Adelaide, there's so many positives in the loss, which is hard to accept in a prelim loss, I know, but the fact that they were smashed so much in the last quarter, particularly in every aspect of the game that they do well usually, which is clearances and contested footy, getting the ball forward and then pressing up and excuse me, and holding the footy in.
Yeah,
they didn't do that well in the last quarter, particularly, and they still had every chance to win the game. So how many positives do you take out of this as a Port Adelaide player or fan?
Well, you take a lot of positives out of the fact that they've had a successful season. I don't think you take too many positives out of the fact that you missed out on an opportunity to win a premiership, because it's easy to sit here and say after a match that they're well placed to do it again next season and go a long way, and over the next 5 years, they're going to be a threat. I mean, it's so easy to say that, and we say that about the losing preliminary finals nearly every season. We've said it about the Giants on a number of occasions. Everyone probably thought they were going to win the premiership this year after making the grand final last year. But it's so hard to climb the mountain again. Melbourne found out that in 2018. Port Adelaide found that out in 2014 when they made the preliminary final, and everyone thought they were the next big thing. And it never quite happened for them over the next couple of years. So climbing the mountain, it can be difficult, or it can be very difficult, and it can take its toll as well. So it'll be fascinating to see how they go about their off-season and attack next year. I mean, if you're asking me about the positives, though, clearly they've got a really good young list, and they're going to get better, you would assume. They'll lose Ebert, but really, there's not many other players that they're going to lose that are in their best 22. And their young brigade are only going to get better. I thought Rosie and Dersma were exceptional. I thought it was, as good a game as Dersma's nearly played. He played like a genuine A grade, I thought, on Friday night, and he was able to match it with some of the best players in the competition. Butters was quiet, but he'll learn from that. He'll get better. They're well placed. There's no doubt about that, and there's a lot to take out of the season, but it gives you no guarantees going into a new season.
Has that just brought up some PTSD for you as a Melbourne supporter? you thought you were there, but then it hasn't quite come back the last 2 years?
Yeah, I guess. It's a great example, isn't it? I mean, 2 years ago, everyone thought Melbourne were the next big things, and in the off season, they were, everyone was tipping them to win the premiership, and it unravelled. And I'm not saying that will happen for Port Adelaide, because I think their culture is really strong, and they've got a really good list. They get the home ground advantage of playing at Adelaide Oval every second week. But yeah, the missed opportunity of making a grand final, winning a premiership, outweighs probably any positive that you can throw up.
Yeah, and I'm speaking from personal experience here. There is nothing like the rude opportunity, and then then you don't get that opportunity the next year. Like there's nothing worse, because you were so close and you should have taken it, and then to have it taken away from you, and then the next year not be able to back it up again. The mind can only think about what could have been. So the one thing for Port, though, so they've sort of taken apart from the clearance game, they've taken the Richmond mould, where it's pressure, get the ball forward, lock it in, and just repeat entries and break teams. So it's a style of play that is easier to replicate, I feel, than other game styles. So it's all an effort. So Ken's got, as Gary Lyons spoke about a few weeks ago, Ken has the Port Adelaide players' hearts and the connections there. So they're willing to run through a brick wall for him. So you can only assume that the energy and the effort that is required to play this game style is going to come back again, which should hold them in good stead with the age of their list and the good balance they got at either end and in the middle. that they should be at least in the 8 again next year. But the 8's going to be so tight next year. There's so many teams that I feel can make the 8 next year. Do you see that as well?
Oh, absolutely. This year of league football with the salary cap, putting so much pressure on sides, and it's even as it's ever been. And if you look at Port Adelaide, I mean, the thing they got going for them is that they don't really have any holes. So they don't have much filling to do in the off-season. They've got a really well-balanced list. And I can't see too many gaping holes across their side. I mean, one thing maybe they could add, because they're so good inside and they're so good at contested footy, is maybe adding an outside midfielder and some polish there. A guy like Motlop's sort of at the end of his career and on the fringe of the side now, and someone to sort of replace that player who can sort of play half forward, half back, wing, and just add and complement their attack, their aggression inside. That's probably really the only thing that they could, I reckon, that they need as such. They're a very well built list at the moment, so I guess their game holds them in really good stead.
If you compare it to Richmond, they need a Shane Edwards or a Kane Lambert type. That sort of that player that you can almost plug them anywhere. If you need to, you can put them at a half back. They can play inside if need be, but then you know that once you get on the outside, they're going to be able to deliver the footy really well and provide some speed. So I would agree with that, because looking at photos of Travis Boak and Ollie Wines at the Brownlow last night, Ollie Wines is a huge man. They've got some big bodies in there, so they don't need any top-ups there, but that outside run is one that they do need. I want to talk to you about the Richmond, or the battle of the fringe players or the role players. So my belief is that the bottom 6 players are always the guys that win your game of footy and win your premierships, because the stars, for the most part, and in majority of occasions, will do their thing and play their part and do what they're supposed to do. But if your bottom 6 players aren't playing well, it just leaves so much more responsibility on the stars. I think Richmond's bottom 6 were really good on Friday night. So, Nathan Broad, Nankervis, Liam Baker, Camden McIntosh, these guys were really effective and really impactful when they went near the footy. Did you notice that as well?
Totally. I mean, it's probably a reflection of Damien Hardwick's ability to coach the side and the group and get them all playing on the one page. I thought Nankervis was exceptional on Friday night. I thought he was outstanding right across the ground. And, they just play their role, Richmond. They have a lot of players that aren't flashy, but they give 100%. You know what you're going to get. And they play as a team better than any other side in the competition. So you almost forget who their bottom 6 are, because they almost have a bottom 10 or bottom 12 because they're so even. And when they lose a player, someone comes in and plays the same role. That's a real reflection on the club as a whole and the culture and their ability to coach. I think Damien Hardwick's ability to coach, the whole group.
I think Nank had one of the best quarters in a final I've just about nearly seen. It was unbelievable. Like some of the Fox Footy had the stats up. It was 5 disposals, 9 hit-outs, 5 to advantage, 3 intercept marks. 4 or 5 intercept possessions. He was absolutely
He's such an important player.
Yeah, and because a lot of the doubt coming into once Soldo went down was, can Nank, take the load by himself? And even going into the game was, all right, do you bring Chol in to give Nank a bit of a chop out? But he proved that he can take the load by himself, and you just need Dave Ashbury to come in and pinch hit for a few minutes here and there. So Nank was really good and had a game just about in the last quarter by himself.
Yeah, absolutely. No, he was outstanding.
Now we'll move to Geelong and Brisbane. So by no means a bad game. The scoreline in the end probably reflected how well Geelong played all night, but Brisbane were thereabouts going into the last quarter. There was no doubt about that. What did you make of the game?
Well, it was one-sided. From the very get-go, I thought Geelong were all over Brisbane. They kept them in the game, which made it, relatively entertaining to watch, because it wasn't over as such until after three-quarter time. But they were the dominant side all night, Geelong. They won the game exactly how they won the game against Collingwood last week, by completely depriving Brisbane of the football. I was looking at the statistics. They won the disposal count by 65. They had 300 disposals to 235. They won the inside 50 count by 18, and they were 10% more efficient with the footy. So not only did they have the ball the entire night, they used it well as well. And that's exactly what they did against Collingwood. And if you put these two games together, I think what Geelong's done over the past 2 weeks is play as good a 2 weeks of football as any side has all season. And although you mentioned, and I'm sure we'll talk about the matchup with Richmond shortly, that you mentioned that they've got a poor record against the Tigers, they are playing as good a footy as they've probably played all year, and that will give them a chance next week, a really good chance, because they're peaking right now. And the young Lions looked like they made Brisbane look like that young side that they were 2 years ago, on the up and not quite ready, if that makes sense, which shouldn't have been the case because they were the home side in the preliminary final. But Geelong monstered them, really. They completely monstered them. What did you make of it?
It was the so we spoke last week about the prelim was going to provide two different sets of headlines. It was either going to be the fairy tale up and coming teams breaking the experienced veterans, or it was going to be the experienced sides being able to break the young brigade, and that's exactly what happened. So Geelong, more so than what Richmond did to Port Adelaide, Geelong just proved how good they still are and the experience that they've got, because, as you said, they made Brisbane look like the young team that they were 2 years ago on the up, when really they're not that anymore. And with the home prelim final in front of their home fans, should have been a lot more dominant. I'm going to say they should have been a lot more dominant and really putting the pressure on Geelong, because that's exactly what they did to Richmond in the qualifying final. They put the pressure back onto Richmond and played with that sort of chest puffed out and the experience that Geelong played with on Saturday night against them. So, you are right. And you look through all the stats, and it was all the Cats' big name players that played well. So they had a really even spread. If you look at the top 10 disposal getters, 7 of them were Geelong players, and it wasn't so and so 30, so and so 25. It was multiple guys getting between 16 and 20 touches and being really effective as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I think in the case of with Brisbane, they've got Lachie Neale, who's an outstanding midfielder. He's an A+ grade midfielder, right? And they've got these other guys on their list they've come on very quickly, and they're still very young. But I think for them to win a game like that against Geelong, they're young B graders, B+ graders need to find another level. So it's okay to come into the system and be a good player straight away, but then it's going from being a good player to being a star of the competition. And that's what the likes of Cam Rayner, Hugh McCluggage, I'm looking through their list now. There's others that just have to find that next gear for them to probably go to be a grand final side or a premiership winning side. And they've got, they've certainly got the talent on their list to do it. But again, it's a bit like Port Adelaide. There's no guarantees with it as well. And they came up against the side who had Selwood, Ablett, Dangerfield, Taylor, Hawkins. They'd all been there before. They knew what to do. They knew how to play at that level, how to handle the occasion. And then they had a great complement of other players like Guthrie, Menegola, Stewart, who have been exceptional all year as well. It was like the big boys in the schoolyard versus the little boys in the schoolyard. And the big boys just weren't phased.
And as you said, it's easy for us to say, all right, Brisbane will be back next year. They'll be, they'll at least be in a prelim, so they'll put themselves in the same spot. But this is 2 years in a row of multiple finals. It's hard. It's going to be, they've got to back up now with the preseason and then back up another year. Like it's going to be a long year and it's going to be a long grind. And the years don't, although this year was shorter, but the years don't get any shorter. And the taxing, the effect on your body and your mental state as well is really hard, especially when you're young like these guys who are probably thinking, can we be fucked going all the way, going that deep again? And, when things get tough, do they sort of revert to, we've been there 2 years in a row now sort of thing? That's the mentality that can come into a young team, which obviously Geelong don't have because of that experience and being there, done that as well. There you go.
I was just going to say, so I was sort of comparing. So Hugh McCluggage last year in the final series was really disappointing, and he bounced back and he was a bit stronger this year. And I think the challenge is going to be for a guy like Jared Berry, who was the other player that I was thinking of. He was really disappointing on Saturday night. I think he'll look back and be really down on himself for the fact that he just wasn't clean with the footy. He wasn't composed, and he looked a bit slow. He's the guy that, who although has had a really good season and has a lot of upside, is going to need to learn to perform in those big games. And that's what I was alluding to before, is that's how Brisbane get from being that really good side to being one of the best sides or the best side in the competition. That's how they got to learn from that, and they got to get better.
And they're lucky that all their young core are entering that age bracket where traditionally you start to enter that sort of prime where you play really good, consistent footy, and then, as you say, finals time you can go to that next level and take that sort of jump. But I'll be keen to watch if they can, get the intensity and the drive up again, because these long campaigns do definitely take a toll on your body and your mind. So Geelong, we were discussing earlier about is their best that we've seen this year and we've seen in the last couple of weeks, is it the best out of them in Richmond?
Well, I think we'll find out in a week's time, because I think they're going as well as they possibly can. They're absolutely humming along, and Richmond are probably going as well as they can go right now. So I think we will find out in about 6 days' time whether their best is good enough, because it's exactly how they're tracking at the moment. They've got the form on the board. They've got everything ticking along. Their stars are playing well. So I think if you're asking me whether or not they can win on Saturday night, then yes, they can win. They can win, even though they've got a poor record against Richmond. There's no doubt about that. If either of these sides are off by 1 or 2%, the other side will win.
Yep. And, we spoke after their qualifying final loss to Port. We talked about their small forward brigade and how they need to fire to really have that forward line humming. And on the weekend, them and a few extra midfielders as well going forward were really effective. So, Gary Rowan, 11 touches, 3 goals. Hawkins, 12 touches, 2 goals. Ablett, 14 and 2. Myers, 14 and a goal. And then Parfitt as well, 14 and a goal. So when your small forwards and your small brigade are doing stuff like that, it makes you really hard to beat.
No, totally. Yeah, it's a bit like Richmond, isn't it? All systems working. And it makes those bottom 6 players look good when your whole side's playing well, because they can feed off the good players around them. So we were talking a bit off air before about how whether there'll be any changes to either of these sides, and there probably won't be, because they're playing so well. So it's probably the first time in a long time that I can remember there won't be much real talk about selection this week. I wouldn't have thought.
Yeah, so we'll go there because they're in interesting spots where they both probably have guys that you can easily bring in, but then it's always the question of who do you take out, and does anyone really deserve to be dropped when the system for both teams is humming along so nicely. So I think Richmond, there's the question of maybe a Josh Caddy in for, say, a Marlon Pickett. That's probably the only one I could really see as a possibility. Bit of a like for a like in the fact that I know Marlon played in last year's grand final, but Caddy probably has the runs on the board in terms of consistency over a long period of time. That could be the only one. Would you do that if you were Hardwick? Do you take the punt on making a change?
Well, I think when there is changes made in grand final week, it's either because there's a player horribly out of form, and I'm thinking of maybe like a Leon Davis when he got dropped, or there's a star player waiting in the wings who's about to return. There's not really anyone terribly out of form, that drastically needs to be dropped, or a bad injury, and there's no superstars about to come into the side. So I would have thought it's unlikely there'll be a change, but it would be quite the story if one year Marlon Pickett was included for his debut in a grand final, and then the following year, after playing most of the season, and although he's been probably, and this might be a bit harsh, but I reckon he's been a touch underwhelming this season.
No, he has been.
Even though he's played, he's only been dropped, I think, twice. He's played regularly throughout the year. It would still be it was an incredible story last year. Add another layer to it if he was to be dropped this year after playing most of the season. Sort of, you feel sorry for him, but at the same time, he got the golden ticket last year as well. So maybe if you're a Richmond supporter, you would know yourself. You're watching them forensically every week. He's probably the likely, the only one who could possibly go out. I think it's unlikely, just because I don't think you want to go into a grand final tinkering with the side if you think things are going so well. It's the old "don't fix something if it's not broken" sort of method. And the other thing he's done, Marlon Pickett, is he's proven that he can perform well in a grand final. I think that does have some weight when you're making a decision at selection in the final week of the season. You know, he played so well last year under as much scrutiny as probably any player's ever played under going into a grand final. So I think that'll go in his favour, and I think he will keep his spot. But yeah, it'd be quite some story if he got dropped.
You could just see the documentary, couldn't you, about Marlon Pickett if he did get dropped. He can such a massive high last year, then it would be into such a big low, no doubt. But I agree. You know, Hardwick's a coach that backs in his guys.
Yeah.
And really backs the system. So I can't imagine he'll make a change. I think that would be the one if I was to make one. If I was gun to my head forced to make a change, I'd probably make that one. No doubt they'll be thinking about Marvia Chol as well, because while Asprey has been good in the ruck to pinch hit and give Nank a bit of a rest, you know, do you want to be taking him out of the back line semi-regularly to play in the ruck and leaving maybe some holes down back? Not really sure. And Chol has the ability to go forward and impact. You know, when he's on, he's not always the most consistent player, but you know, do you back him in the grand final? That might be sort of the stage where he comes up and does some crazy things. So they're probably the two that Richmond have to think about. But in terms of Geelong, I can't see anyone going out. The one a couple of weeks ago you thought maybe was Sam Simpson when he came in for Tom Atkins, but he's played as good a footy in the last 2 weeks as anyone. So I can't imagine Geelong are going to be rushing him out quickly.
No, I don't think so either. And he strikes me as the sort of guy who's pretty composed, and when he gets the football, he seems to make really good decisions with it as well. And that will hold him in good stead in the grand final as well, when he's obviously, like, you know, what I was saying just before, he's playing under as much pressure as you can possibly be under. So I think that'll certainly work in his favour. And yeah, I'd be surprised if Geelong made a change just off the back of the fact that they've played 2 outstanding weeks of football.
Now, how much is Damien Hardwick thinking, or the players at Richmond are thinking about Chris Scott's comments from before the season started? Do you remember those?
Yeah, I don't think he'd be thinking at all about it, though. Look, it's a great sub-story to the week, and it will certainly be, you know, played on numerous shows throughout the week and be spoken and written about. But I've got no doubt that these two coaches will be so focused on what the job is at hand this week, and it bears no relevance to their performance on Saturday, and they won't need any more motivation than what they've already got in front of them. You know, winning one of the most difficult premierships that there's ever been. You know, what was once spoken about as possibly having an asterisk next to it, I think now will go down as one of the great premierships, really, because of what every team has had to endure throughout the season. So, you know, motivation is at an all-time high, as it should be in the grand final. So I don't think that there'll be much spoken about there.
And considering the fact that the two teams that have made the grand final are Victorian, have been in hubs for, you know, so long now, there could never be an asterisk next to this flag, because these two teams in particular have been through the ringer in terms of what they've had to deal with and their families have had to deal with this season. So, I mean, the interstate teams can throw away all their too much travel complaining from now on, because this is their year and every team folded except for the two travelling Victorian teams.
Yeah, you're right, Nashy. I mean, the interstate sides have long had that argument that they do it tougher than the Victorian sides, but the Victorian sides have had to go away this season, go into hubs and play all over the country away from home without their supporter base. And it's two Victorian sides in the grand final for the first time in a long time. So they've proven that point. For the players that are playing on Saturday night, there's a touch, you know, an element of a disappointment probably for the likes of Dangerfield and that have never played in the grand final, and they don't get to do so in front of their own family and friends back home. But, you know, when we look back on this in 10 or 15 years' time, it will hold as much weight as any other premiership. And there is some fantastic stories this weekend, like Gary Ablett playing in his last game. You know, he's played 356 games, and to go out in a grand final would be, you know, amazing if he was to win a third premiership. You know, Joel Selwood's led his side to finals, I think, 13 times. In 14 or 15 years of football. Richmond going for 3 flags in 4 years, Geelong going for 4 in 15 years. It's an incredible match. It's set up to be one of the all-time great grand finals, and I hope it lives up to that.
It's a weird one with it's basically 2020 in a nutshell. Is that the clubs have been told be there by the time the game starts, and that's really your only requirement. There's no parade. No doubt the media requirements aren't quite as big as they usually are, and all you got to focus on is being there by the time the game starts, which is weird considering it's grand final week.
Yeah, and there's so much about this season that probably gets swept under the carpet by a lot of the general public. The fact that the teams haven't really been able to train properly at all throughout the season. I don't know what the situation necessarily is right now, but for a lot of the season, it was a case of training in groups and only having a full training session once, and they couldn't do contact at certain times. And then when you're not training, you can only go and be with a certain group of players, and you're living a lifestyle that is just so far from normal. And even us living in the world right now, like what the AFL players and professional athletes are going through is completely even different to that, because they're in a bubble. So the challenges they've had to overcome, I think there would be a great sense of fulfillment for the side that wins on Saturday night. There's no doubt about that.
Now, who do you think is going to win, Matty? Who's your tip? Because it's so evenly poised, and unlike last year where you sort of knew Richmond had the edge over the Giants, considering the Giants' injury woes. This year you've got Geelong, who are absolutely humming coming into the finals in terms of form, and Richmond, who have taken everyone in the past few years. So, who do you take?
I'm really confident that I think it'll go down to the wire. I'm really confident that I think we'll get one of the better grand finals that we've had. I think we're due for a cracker. I mean, there was a good one with Collingwood and West Coast a few years ago, but we have had some fizzes in the last 5 or 10 years. But I'm so confident it's going to be a cracker. In terms of picking a winner, look, you're right. Geelong's record against Richmond hasn't been superb of recent times. But I was looking back to their game against them in round 17 where they lost by 26 points. They didn't have Ablett. They didn't have Selwood that night. And the game, there's a few other things that went in their favour. Geelong it was a bit like Port Adelaide's statistics against Richmond on Friday night. So Geelong had twice the amount of clearances Richmond did that night. So they set up so well defensively. I think Geelong's going so much better now than they were at that point of the season. And it will be a different contest. There was also a Metricon that night, which Richmond have a leaning to. They chose to play that game against St Kilda there because they enjoy playing in those conditions more than they do at the Gabba. So that again sort of goes back into Geelong's favour. So I think Richmond deserve to be that slight favourite, which they are in the market. But I'm going to tip Geelong because I think I have to back what I'm seeing visually, and what they've done the last 2 weeks is as good a football as I've seen all season. So, I have to trust that, if I'm making a judgment on who wins on Saturday night, that they can bring that form to the game and possibly beat Richmond. So I will tip in that way, but, it's good luck. It's
a coin toss, isn't it?
Yeah, and I know you're a Richmond man, so I'm assuming you've got a slight leaning towards the Tigers.
Yeah, I'll still be taking the Tiggies, but in the back of your mind, that you're running into Geelong, who are playing as good a footy as they have all year. Probably matching the form they had sort of midway through the year, where they were the clear flag favourites, and it was basically catch them if you can. So they're in as good a form as I've seen. I'm going to take Richmond. I'm going to take them by 3 goals in the end.
3 goals.
I'm going to go 3 goals. I reckon these finals.
You just don't want to have a heart attack.
It could be so close, and then there's no sort of junk time goals that just happen in the last minute. So that's usually what I think is going to happen in these big kind of finals. So I'm going Richmond 3 goals. And I want to say Dusty for his 3rd Norm Smith, but I'm not quite sure. That's such a tough feat to be able to do it, 3 times on the biggest stage. So I'm going to go Dion Prestia for the Norm Smith medal.
Well, if they win Richmond, there's every chance that he will win the Norm Smith medal. He's been their best player in their wins over the last month or so. He had 21 touches and 2 goals on Friday.
And the other thing you have to take into consideration is that Richmond have usually such an even spread of possession getters and guys that kick goals. So all Dusty has to do is have 20 touches and kick 2 goals, and he's probably won the Norm Smith there because
he stands out.
He stands out with what he does, and no one's going to have crazy man of the footy usually, if you're going off what Richmond usually do. So he's every chance.
Yep, absolutely no doubt about that. Good luck picking a Norm Smith medalist, or I mean, there's so many players that could put their hand up and win it because there's so many stars running out there on Saturday night. So
who's your tip for the Norm and for the Norm Smith and a margin?
I'm gonna say if Geelong win, I'm gonna say Joel Selwood. I think he's just built for that sort of game, and he'll put his head over the football all day long. And you know, look, it could be Dangerfield as well. It could be Hawkins could kick 5. Lynch could kick 5. You know, I don't like. It's interesting you say about junk time goals. It's exactly why I never really invest in margin betting or line betting in football, because so often it can be an even contest for 95% of the match, and then the last 5 minutes is junk time goals and it blows it out, and you don't really get the scoreline doesn't reflect how tight the contest was. So I think, in my opinion, at 3/4 time it will be game on. That's one thing I think I can be certain of. I think at 3/4 time it will be whoever can bring their very best football in the fourth quarter that will win the match.
Now, Matty, you are a betting man, and I've woken up this morning and I don't know how it's happened, but I've got a $50 bonus bet in the account.
Right.
Now, so how do I break it up? Am I going with a multi? Am I backing a Norm Smith Weddle winner? What's your advice? I need to make some money.
Well, you could have it on Tiger Moth in the Melbourne Cup, but if you want to bet on the football, if you want to have a bet on the footy, well, you throw me under the bus here, Nash.
I'll have a little bit, yeah, but
I haven't had a good look.
Are you a multi man, or are you more a sort of head-to-head type better, or do you like putting the goal scorers in?
I'm a careful bettor with the football, so I don't just have same game multis for the sake of it, because I feel like that's a recipe for disaster.
Yep.
I do think there's money to be made in betting in the football if you've got the time to look through the markets and find something that's over the odds. Because if you're backing things that are over the odds more often than not, that's your best chance of winning on the punt, really. So there is always value in football markets if you look hard enough. So I will endeavour to do that for you, Nashi, and I will send you a message later in the week to find that out. If I'm giving advice, generally speaking, no, I'm not a superstar on the punt or anything, but look at, say, who's performed well in grand finals before and how many disposals they've had, who's performed well when these two sides have matched up, because, if the game's going to be played similarly, someone might find a lot more of the footy than they usually do. If we're thinking back to that round 17 match when the footy was spent a lot of the time in Richmond's half, defensive half, even though they won the game, then take a half-back flanker or defender to get more, 15 touches or something like that. That's how you can find value. The Norm Smith markets and the first goal markets, because they're so heavily punted on grand final day, the market's usually so diluted, so you're getting terrible odds. So yep. I wouldn't be advising you to have $100 or a large bet on that market. Have something small if you want to have a bit of fun, and then look at the disposal markets, or a goal kicking market.
Yep.
If you think someone's going to spend some more time forward. Dangerfield, for example, might spend a lot more time. I don't think he will. I think Dangerfield will spend a lot more time in the midfield.
Yeah.
To be honest, on Saturday night, I don't think they'll take that risk. But that's the sort of thing you need to be looking for.
I think as a Richmond Nuffy at heart, I'm probably just going to go the old, all right, I'll back my team head-to-head and make some money off money that I didn't even have to begin with. So the bonus bet's going to be good. Yeah, you bring up a good point. You bring up a good point there with Dangerfield. So quick little sort of, I don't know, maybe preview of some stuff for the game. So what do you do with Dangerfield? Because do you go away from what's been working for you to this point in terms of playing, a fair bit of time forward, or do you just say it's grand final day, we need Dangerfield in the middle, getting the footy for us?
I think you start him in the midfield, and I think you have it in your mind that you're going to play him in the middle for the majority of the match. I think you'd think about throwing him forward. There's no point throwing him forward if Richmond are on top and they're 3 or 4 goals in front as a last resort. There's no point doing that, because if the ball's down the other end, he's not going to be able to impact the contest to the level that you need. I'd be going the other way and saying if Geelong are really on top and winning the clearances, the likes of Selwood and that are doing a lot of the work in that sense, then there's an opportunity to send him forward and take advantage of Richmond in that way. But I think you're starting him in the middle of the ground and you're playing him there as your first resort, your second resort, and your third resort before you start thinking about moving in, because the game will be won and lost in the middle, as it so often is.
I think you see that you take the Dusty recipe, because you see with Dusty, especially in big games, always starts in the middle, and you can tell he's energetic and he's a bit more intense than, say, a regular season game. But then as soon as they feel that Richmond's starting to get on top a little bit, he's sneaking out the back of that stoppage. He's going forward straight away, because that's when teams are most vulnerable and when he can really impact. So I think Geelong had to take that approach and let Dangerfield do his thing in the middle, but then almost give him free rein and say, when you feel we're on top, get forward and let's make the most of our run and our momentum, I think.
Yep. Yeah, maybe it's a case of the last 3 or 4 minutes of the first, second and third quarters that you use him in that space. And, instead of resting him on the bench, you just put him in the pocket and hope that he can clunk one or kick one from 50 or something like that and create a bit of magic. But yeah, it'll be fascinating. He's such an important player in their side, and it might be. We spoke about the bottom 6 players on both of these sides, getting them to this point, but it's the kind of game where your superstars will win you the match, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think considering the caliber of players. In terms of stars on both sides, you feel if either of those side stars can fire, they will hold them in good stead and no doubt bring the role players along with them in such a big game, because especially for Geelong, there's some of those role players haven't been there. So if Danger and Selwood and these guys can bring them along, it'll hold them in good stead.
Yeah, totally agree.
Matty, it's been a pleasure as always, mate. I look forward to hopefully chatting to you next week with another flag as a fan. So we'll see how we go, but it should be a great game and one I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see your mood on Monday, Nashi. You might not have slept for 3 days, or you could be completely the opposite. So
we might be sending you a message just saying, "No, let's not worry about it, mate. I don't want to talk about it. It's all good."
Yes, exactly. Looking forward to it. Can't wait. It's going to be an absolute cracking grand final. Yeah, as excited for this grand final as I ever have been, I think.
Can't wait, mate. Looking forward to it. We'll chat next week.
Good on you, Nashi.